One of the pressing issues that people are concerned about today is the issue of immigration. It's an issue that really every country faces to a certain degree, and certainly we see it in Europe, we see it in Great Britain, we see it in the United States. Many countries are facing this type of problem in terms of how to deal with the great number of immigrants that are coming to various countries. So this has been studied by many different groups. One of the interesting groups is the Immigration Research Initiative, which is based in Manhattan. And David Disregard-Calic is the director of that group. And he talks about the Long Island situation. And he says $3 billion is paid into the local economy for every 1,000 immigrants who come to Long Island. So the immigrants have a positive effect in terms of the economy that way. But what many analysts look at is, well, what are the expenses that come with the immigrants as well? Another research group, the Center for Immigration Studies, which is based in Washington, D.C., has taken a more extensive look. Stephen Camarader is the director of research there. He says that migrants pay nearly $26 billion annually in income taxes. So $26 billion is a significant amount of money into the economy. They pay that in income taxes and Social Security and Medicare, which is, monies that are deducted, of course, from their pay. They grow the economy by about $320 billion each year. So again, a significant amount. However, when you looked at the situation over a lifetime, he says they do place a fiscal drain on the government of about $68,000 per person. Their taxes are really paid on lower wages, and they qualify for a larger percentage of public benefits. So, and again, this would be over a lifetime, so we're talking about a good number of years. It's not $68,000 per year or anything, but be rated over a longer period of time. So they do have sort of a positive effect on the economy, but their wages are lower, which means ultimately they pay less taxes. And because of their lower wages, they do qualify for a larger percentage of public benefits. So again, all of this must be evaluated when we look at the situation. There are a number of other groups that do research in terms of immigration. The Ellis Island Institute, the Executive Office for Immigration Review, the Transactional Records Access Clearinghouse in Syracuse University, the Center for Migration Studies in New York, Migration Policy Institute in Washington, D.C., and the Pew Research Center. So you can see that there's a lot of groups that are interested in immigration and studying it, and it's a very complicated issue to kind of take a look at. In New York, if we look at the New York picture, there are over 200 sites in New York for the migrants that have been coming into New York. Over 170,000 foreign migrants have been processed by New York City since the spring of 2022, when those states from the southern borders started sending migrants to the northern cities. And when you look at it, there's a certain justice involved in that there is no really one part of the country that should bear the burden unduly, but it should be a shared burden among all of the states. And certainly there's a logic to that. There's a lot of different forms, too, that have to be filled out by the migrants who come in. And so it creates a complicated picture. There's a form 1589, which is an asylum form. There's a 194, I-94, record of arrival, I-765 to seek work, which has to be filed at least 150 days after the I-589, so you have to do it in sequence. Is the I-821 for temporary protected status, and for that there is currently a 14-month processing time. So it's not just the filling out of the form and you get the status, but you do have to wait for it. For Venezuelans who crossed by July 31st, 2023, they are entitled to this temporary protected status. There's also the fees that are associated with these filings. And then there's an I-912, which is a waiver of application fees. There's also help for the asylum seekers. There's the Asylum Seeker Application Help Center in New York City. 23,537 of the migrants have submitted applications with the help of New York City, so they're trying to help them file these forms properly. There's also many nonprofits that try to help with the situation. In Rockland County, there's the Convent Neg Leki that helps Haitian immigrants. What turns out to be a real problem for the migrant is the difficulty in enrolling in schools when you have children. To enroll in school, you need a proof of residency, you need utility bills, you need statements from a landlord. Very difficult to get those statements from the landlord because a lot of times the landlord is concerned that maybe then the housing situation will be investigated and they might have problems with that, and so they're reluctant to give those statements to the immigrants who are living in the apartments. In New York City, the migrant who arrives has 30 days to find alternative housing. They're evicted after 30 days for the individual, then they have to reapply if they don't have housing. It's 60 days for families, so double that for a family. They're given more time. The problem, again, with those who have been evicted, if they have families, the children have been going to certain schools, they might apply for other housing, it might take them to a different part of the city, and then getting their child to that school involves a cost, transportation, they might not have the funds for that. So again, the difficulty of that situation for the migrant. Let's look at the Long Island scene. The Long Island scene has many people who want to help the migrants. One of the biggest groups is the Central American Refugee Center, with offices in Hempstead and Brentwood. They report that asylum cases have increased from an average of 4 per week to 25. Listi Castillo is the executive director. Her staff increased from 12 at the end of 2022 to 28 at the end of 2023. So you can see more than doubled. Elise thinks that that number would probably go up to 34 in 2024 to handle this increased volume of asylum cases. Catholic Charities also helps with those cases, and there is now a waiting list for people who are seeking asylum. Carmen Maguilan is the director of the Immigration Services for Catholic Charities, and she tries to assist the immigrants. Now, what about getting asylum? Many people have questions about that. Is it too liberal? Can just anybody get it? Well, being poor and wanting a better life are not a legal basis for obtaining asylum. So if you have a situation where you are in poverty in another country and you think coming to America will get you out of poverty, that is not enough to grant asylum. And I guess the reason for that would be, well, what about the other people who are working to get into the country by legal means? If you grant asylum to these other ones, you're really undercutting the whole process. So they're reluctant, certainly, to give asylum just for people who want a better life or who want a job. So to be eligible for asylum, first of all, you must be inside of the United States. That's why so many of the immigrants come to the country, to the border. To apply, you must be in the country when you seek asylum or you are a refugee. You must be able to demonstrate that you were persecuted or have a fear of persecution in your home country due to your race, your religion, your nationality, your social group, or your political opinion. So you can see there is a rather wide basis for asylum. And a lot of those who come really are facing that type of situation where they are literally persecuted in their home country for a variety of reasons, and they would find it difficult to live in that country. Example, and this is people who were not really in economic distress initially, family who owned several businesses, and part of the gangs in the country came to them and demanded a payment of 1,200 American dollars per month for protection for their businesses. If they didn't pay the protection, various family members would be killed. So they decided to leave their country and come to America with their family. You can see why they would. Uh, Nobody wants to pay that kind of money. It was, beyond their resources to pay that, and if they didn't pay it, they would be killed. So obviously there are cases like that, many cases where people are in very difficult situations. There's a problem in many of these countries where people are coming from with gangs. There's a problem if you're in the opposition political party of getting persecuted and put in jail. There was the whole movement in Argentina that disappeared, those who were in the opposition, and they were literally handcuffed and captured and tied up and taken into airplanes and dropped into the ocean. And they, a lot of them disappeared that way. In other ways, they were killed, assassinated. So there are these legitimate fears that people have. To apply for asylum, you must file an asylum application, the Form I-589, within 1 year of arriving in the United States or in the United States, and you have that time limit to apply. You must be working in the United States. You can also help family members seek asylum, and you can file for permanent residence and get your green card. If you came to the United States in the last 2 years and as an asylee, you may also be able to sponsor your spouse and qualifying children to join you. And they can get derivative refugee or asylee status. And you have to file a Form I-730 in order to do that. So again, the whole process involves knowing the system, knowing which forms to file, getting assistance with that, having the finances to file the forms. The forms can be a challenge for people. So getting that assistance, but to get that assistance, there is a backlog of people, as we saw with Catholic Charities and with the Carison Center. There's a waiting list, obviously, for people to get the help that they need, and they're trying to add more staff to help with that situation. To file for your spouse, to get your spouse to come, you had to be married before you entered as a refugee or were granted asylum. And filing for a child, your child had to be conceived or born before you entered as a refugee or were granted asylum. So there are certain conditions for the spouse and for the child. The estimate on Long Island is there's about 100,000 immigrants without legal documentation before the latest wave. And the latest wave doesn't seem to be very significant on Long Island at this point. Of course, it might grow. And that was the estimate was in 2019, with 35,000 from El Salvador, 13,000 from Honduras, 3,000 from Guatemala, mostly in Nassau County. There were immigrants from Mexico and 5,000 from Ecuador, and that was mostly in Suffolk County. Difference with New York City, a major difference. New York City has what we call a right to shelter law, which means it is legally obligated to house anyone who is homeless. Now you might say, well, that kind of makes sense. Shouldn't we house people that are homeless? But again, tapping the resources when there's a great number that come, how do you find places for all these people? It's a legal mandate that the city has, and the city now is asking, of course, surrounding communities to help. But people, of course, are reluctant to help because there are limited resources that are available, limited housing that is available. For example, Nassau County does not provide assistance to migrants in the county illegally. no assistance is given. Children of migrants without papers are legally entitled to some services, though, such as education, so they can enroll in schools. But again, enrolling in the school, you need the utility bills, you need proof of residence, and that can be complicated as well. Suffolk County has help that is available, but it is for those with legal status. The New York Immigration Coalition, Patrick Young is the director of organizing and strategy for it. He's also a special professor of law at Hofstra University Law School, and they have studied this immigration issue, which, as you can see, is a rather complicated and complex issue. But Long Island has the fifth largest concentration of Salvadorans in the United States. Central America has dominated the Long Island situation since the 1980s because of civil wars and the death squads. So if you're on the wrong side of the Civil War, you want to leave the country, obviously, because your life is threatened. And of course, the death squads coming for you or your children or your cousins or your uncles, you get the message, I better leave or I could die. Now the situation has changed a bit. Many from Ecuador, where there's a huge problem with gangs, and again, that would involve the threat on your life. Peru is a bit of an unstable country now. They have had 6 presidents in the last 8 years. In 2020, they went through 3 presidents in 1 week, so you can see there's not much stability there. Colombia, there's a lot of migrants from Colombia. And then, of course, Venezuela, due to the economic collapse. In Patchogue, there's a large number from Ecuador. The East End has a large population as well of immigrants, and OLA, an organization which is based in East Hampton, tries to reach out and help them. The North Fork Spanish Apostolate tries to help the immigrants. They are based in Riverhead. Also, there are many legal refugees. Visas approved by the United States government, for example, refugees from Haiti, Ukraine, Afghanistan, those who are fleeing the mafias in Honduras. A lot of those legal refugees are helped by Catholic charities. So what can we say overall about the immigration problem? We can say, first of all, it is a rather significant problem. It's a problem where we need certainly to work towards a solution. One of the things that we look at from a faith perspective is that whole concept of welcoming the alien, welcoming the stranger. How do we do that in this situation where the numbers are large and resources can be very limited? Pope Francis has suggested that we as Catholics kind of step up to the plate and open our homes, open our lives to help those who are coming from other countries in very difficult situations. It is a challenge for all of us. It's certainly a challenge to our faith, a challenge to our practice of our faith, a very difficult situation. Many will say, well, just send them back to their own country, but if you're sending people back to their own country where there are no opportunities for them and there is the threat of death and persecution, that certainly is a difficult thing. How can we do that? How can we turn our back on our sisters and brothers? So it's a situation that is difficult, a situation certainly that we have to pray about. There is no simple solution to this problem, but it is, with every problem, also an opportunity for us to be creative in how we deal with this, to be just, to be fair. Certainly, many people look at this and say, well, are there people taking advantage of the situation? Are they bringing in drugs? Are they bringing in weapons? Are gangs and criminals coming in? Certainly, all of these considerations must be evaluated carefully. You don't want to open your country to people who would be criminals, who would do damage to communities. So certainly that's a very important consideration to look at and to try to prevent in every way we can. So as we pray about this situation, I think we can keep in mind the example of Jesus, who certainly was very welcoming, and also the whole idea of looking at this from a point of view of justice and fairness, and looking for solutions that are workable, that bring us all together as a community to help build up one another, to make us truly in the body of Christ, show caring for one another, to do it in a way that is wise, in a way that honors the dignity of the human person.